99 problems, but a bitchy man hippie. Good morning, everyone, says Mr. Tarun. Good morning. Good podcast with Sir. Sir. Mr. Tarun, so sweet of you. So sweet of you. Oh, you mean good podcast with Sanjeev Bichandani, sir? Oh, yeah. Thank you. So sweet of you yet again. So sweet of you. Thank you. Thank you. A leopard doesn't change its spots. Pretty heavy, right? That line was pretty heavy. And many lines, actually. Many heavy lines. Sanjeev Bichandani, sir, is a heavy hitter. That was a nice conversation. Notice that he didn't give any faff to anything, right? That's the beauty of the situation. Now, a lot of people, I've told you about my dislike for people who are like, oh, it's not gonna be like when I asked, sir, is AI gonna kill jobs? He said, definitely there's gonna be some jobs which are gonna be redundant, you know. But as a person, you might just want to pivot. He didn't say, no, it's gonna create new opportunities and so on and so forth, right? He didn't give any of that shit because that's what makes him so special, right? He doesn't deal in faff. Bird, not branches. That was a pretty good one, right? A pretty poetic way of saying that you've got to be a birdman. You got to survive. And you got to find a way to survive. So that was pretty good. Good morning, Mr. Tiwari. And I guess you can hear me. So let's begin, right? If you can hear me, we will begin the show that we deserve. El Dorado. I guess you can hear me then, right? El Dorado, by the way, is a beautiful poem. Uh, but let me just check myself on LinkedIn. Yeah, LinkedIn is good. LinkedIn is good. Let's begin. Bum 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 bum. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Thinker's Frequency. We're having such a good time. This is the peak of human civilization. We're working so hard, doing such good work for ourselves, our parents, our kids, our siblings, our husbands, our wives, our friends, everybody. Well, not other people's husbands and wives, I hope. And just when we thought things couldn't get any better, like they couldn't possibly get any better, well, they just did. Call it divine intervention, folks, but things just got a whole lot better. Now we have Thinker's Frequency, our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. So let's continue with our journey of reading between the lines things that are especially interesting and important in the world of business and finance. Let's go! Oh, but before we go, you gotta follow a tradition, right? You know the tradition, the sweet and sacred tradition of the simultaneous sip. We'll all sip something together and it'll bring us good luck, as it always does without fail every day. And all you need for the simultaneous sip is a copper mug, a glass, a tank, a chalice, a stein, a canteen jug, a flask, or a vessel of any kind. Pour it with your favorite liquid. I like hot water with some black pepper in it. And here we go. Oh my god, beautiful. Let's do it again. Sublime. You know what the simultaneous sip says, right? You know what it says? It says that you are not alone. It says that we are in this together. And that's such a beautiful thing to say. With that out of the way, let's begin. There's been a lot of developments, very serious developments as far as the whole place considered. Number one is Urban Company has won the Startup of the Year award, which is a pretty big deal. ET Startup of the Year award. I've told you a lot about Urban Company and why the company is special, right? There are not many companies who can claim to have been as conscientious or as, nice as Urban Company. Urban Company deals in a very difficult business model where it has to actually engage people. And you know, India has a problem as far as work ethics are considered, right? And in that kind of market, it's very difficult to organize people at that scale. It's extraordinarily difficult to get people on time working and giving a reliable service at that scale. So earlier versions of this business model, like Just Dial, didn't take responsibility of the service, right? So they were smart like that because they ran an asset light, ops light model. They just listed people, and then those people essentially called you, and then it was on you and those people, right? And that business worked very well. Just Dial is a $1 billion company. It was acquired by Reliance for like $950 million, and since then it's grown. But Urban Company chose the hard work. It actually chose the work where it had to actually manage the operations essentially, right? Without keeping people on roll. So very difficult business model, and they've been at it, man. They've been at it, and they've done so well. Just imagine how difficult the business model must be that there's practically no competition to Urban Company. I'm sorry, it used to be called Urban Clap when back when we were working with it. So my company Testament, we worked with Urban Company a lot. Now there is no competition. So there was something called House Joy, which was funded by Amazon in the early stages. The company got mired in some sort of sexual harassment cases. The founders, had to move out, and then the company just essentially flamed out. Right? It just fell off the charts. It couldn't grow. It changed its business model to construction, something in construction, and since then, it's basically been out of radar. I will have to look at how it's going for them now. But they pivoted to construction, and since then, nobody has entered Urban Companies market, right? Nobody has tried this. A lot of people tried, unfortunately, actually. Like Flipkart tried. Flipkart announced that it's going to get into the AC repair business, so on and so forth. Couldn't do it. Couldn't do it, right? Flipkart couldn't do it. Nobody could do it, actually, because managing people on that kind of an operation is just extraordinarily hard. It's just playing with fire every day, right? And a lot of VC companies have begun doing the same things as Urban Company. So VCs have funded newfound competitors to Urban Company. Those experiments will end in tears. That's a prediction of mine, which you can take to the bank, I say. Those experiments will end in tears. Uh, but Urban Company has won this particular award, ET's prestigious Startup of the Year award. Uh, it it's pretty good. I just looking at that article, I just messaged it to the founder Abhiraj, and he just instantly is like very thankful. It's extraordinarily difficult play and very very nice people. Uh, great work. Moving on, Chip Mission 2.0 to prioritize silicon carbide wafer making. A comment from Mr. Tiwari. UC is a case study for sure. Used a few times. They're really good. Just imagine running a business like that, right? It's a case study for sure, and everything is great. But just imagine running that business. It's an operational nightmare, man, on steroids. It's that nightmare which wakes you up, literally. But they've been able to do that by sheer grit, right? That's why there's no gonna be. I don't see any other urban company starting off, right? No matter how many people try, it's just gonna be a very very because grit is not a business strategy. Grit is not a replicable business strategy. Let's say. That's why there's just one Sarvana Bhavan, right? There's just one Haldirams. There's just one Ferns and Petals. Because grit, operational grit, and sheer grit is not a replicable business strategy. So if UC has been able to do it, if Urban Company has been able to do it, doesn't mean anything for anybody else, right? It doesn't say that other people are gonna do it as well. So that's a very important point to be noted, by the way. Moving on. Chip Mission 2.0 to prioritize silicon carbide wafer making. SIC wafers allotted strategic priority as METI decides on ISM2 contours, say officials. So of course, India is actually looking at the whole chip manufacturing play at a pretty big depth. So the government has almost exhausted funds under the first phase of ISM. ISM was India's semiconductor mission. That was 76,000 crore, under which 10 projects have been approved till date. Right? Now, this is the next in line. SIC wafers allotted strategic priority in ISM 2.0, India Semiconductor Mission 2.0, push for SIC wafers due to them operating at a higher voltages and temperatures. So, this is basically a natural progression of things. That's why we discussed how starting in this direction was very, very important. And that's why we criticized Mr. Raghuram Rajan so much, right? Because this particular beginning, the chip manufacturing beginning, the semiconductor manufacturing beginning, no matter how, let's say, dull in comparison to superpowers like China or US, was a very important start, because you've got to start somewhere, right? You've got to start somewhere. That's why the whole Indian semiconductor chip mission was critical, because you spent like 76,000 crores. There's like 1,76,000 crores that have been spent on these plants. There's going to be something in Dhulera, there's going to be something in Assam, there's going to be 10 other plants which are going to be doing like the whole ATMP thing, right? So all these things lead to cascading effects. The world runs on second order effects of things, right? It's not just one thing in isolation. It's never one thing in isolation. It's always what that particular thing leads to, right? Even if you set up a shop somewhere, or even if you set up a small office somewhere, the cascading effects of it, you can see them. You can literally see those effects, right? Once you set up an office, you have like 5 people working in that office. Suddenly there's gonna be tea and coffee guys, coming to you. Suddenly there's gonna be some sort of Maggie guys coming to you. Even if you set up an office in a absolutely discrepant area, right? So desolate kind of a place, you're gonna see a small economy thriving, and that's what the semiconductor mission did, right? This is what's gonna happen. The first fabrication unit to manufacture SIC wafers got approval from government earlier this month under ISM, Chennai-based 6M Private Limited, 2,000 crore facility. And so Tata Group's 91, we've talked about this a lot. So speaking of this, there's a lot of concern as far as whole Trump tariff situation is considered, right? We really got that at a very bad time, because a lot of investments had happened and a lot of investments were happening, right? A lot of investments were happening in this electronics manufacturing play, the whole chip industry play, right? And Infineon CEO says that Trump's tariff regime has created deep uncertainty for chip industry. No company can shift factories in 1 or 2 months. It's simply not possible. Until there's a definite clarity, we can only wait and prepare. CS Chua, President and MD Infineon Industries. So they're saying they're doubling down on India, but they're scared, obviously. A lot of people thought that Apple's manufacturing in India would absolutely get halted, as soon as Trump tariffs get announced and so on and so forth. And I said, if you'd remember, that nothing of that sort is going to happen. So no matter how grand your ambitions are, it takes time. It takes time to shift things, to make things, right? And India got, let's say, the benefit of time when the China plus one strategy started hitting in 2016, right? That's when India started getting those, these investments. 2016, when US said they're going to be in a trade war with China, that's when India started benefiting. Now, in 2020 to 2024, during that period, that particular thing slowed down a bit, didn't get halted, right? So you have like a 10 years of headway where these companies have thought about things and they've made investments and they've parked money, they've raised money and so on and so forth, right? Now, if everything is to shift in US, it'll take at least 2 or 3 years for people to even park money. Forget about start working, right? That's going to take 4 years or 5 years. So the things take time, and that's exactly what these companies are also saying, that hey, China strategy is still should be still on, because they've really, in these past 10 years, They've done a lot of work, background work. Moving on. uh, Elevate Ventures logs final close of its 160 million round. 160 million. How's that? 1400 crores, right? 1400 crores. Deals in consumer internet, enterprise software, and fintech sectors. So that's a good lead. I'll talk to these guys. Anyway, uh, this is essentially the whole tariff situation is also leading to some sort of action as far as rupee is considered. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember rupee is falling. 88 rupees per dollar. So that's not good for Indian rupee. But that's a double-edged sword, right? What happens when rupee goes down? What happens when rupee goes down is devaluation. Devaluation leads to better exports, right? Your exports become cheaper for the receiving country, right? Because the rupee's value is down, and your export becomes cheaper. Now, if your export becomes cheaper, it becomes slightly more competitive, right? That's how China grew as an export destination. It just kept devaluing yuan till the point where everybody else was just uncompetitive, especially because China is a uh, domestic uh, consumption is just pretty 30 to 40% of the entire economy. China is not a consumption dependent economy. So that's how devaluation benefits the export industry, right? But it, as Mr. Mittal says, at least I think rupee falling is a good thing. It makes things works for US, at least in the current situation. Now that is not unfortunately not true for India, because India is mostly an import dependent country. About 60%, 70%, 60 to 70% of Indian economy, about 62% of Indian economy is consumption dependent, and we import a lot of crude, right? And uh, all the oil that we import, all the crude that we import essentially gets affected if the rupee declines, right? So unfortunately for India, India is not an export dependent economy. And despite whatever happens, right? Let's say if the rupee falls down 10%, which it has, like in the last 6 8 months, last in the year, it must have fallen about 8%, 3.3% just fell this month. It's not enough to manage what's going on, right? But this could be a strategy by RBI to let the rupee fall and see what happens. A few comments which distracted me. You meant China is not an export driven economy, not consumption driven. Yeah, I meant China is an export driven economy, not a consumption driven economy, because Chinese consumption, domestic consumption, just makes up for like 30 to 40% of its total GDP, right? So that's China. India, 60 plus 65% of Indian GDP is consumption. US, 70% of US GDP is consumption. So US is purely a consumption driven economy. China is purely an export driven economy. India is a mix of both. India is more or less a trade economy, right? So I hope that is clear. Right now, RBI is letting the rupee slide. So let's see what happens. If rupee goes $89, it's gonna be a bit of a hassle, right? It's gonna be much of a hassle. Now these things are really hurting what's happening to the financial markets of India. Now FPIs are exiting. FPI outflows at 4 billion, highest in 7 months. So they're taking money out of India. Now, one reason why FPIs must be taking money out of India is because September is usually a dull month for Indian markets. So, according to a report by Motilal Oswal Group, in the last 10 years, the month September has always been bad for markets. It's always been bad for markets. It's like, on an average, some 0.33, 0.44%, something like that. The market has declined during September. So it makes sense for FPIs to essentially take out the money while all this happens and then come back in October, right? So you can take it as a prediction. The FPI inflow in October might just be, might just be pleasantly surprising, but not surprising to us because we are observing this very closely. But this is what happens, right? September is a dull month, and all of what's happening is leading to some sort of stress as far as the whole emerging market economy is considered, right? And uh, a lot of so private capex, by the way, has grown a little, about 6-8%. Private capex grew to 2.68 lakh crores from 2.3 lakh crores last year. However, most of it is par, and from the next is construction. So not exactly the private capex you want, right? Because construction and power, the kind of jobs they create are not really, uh, you know, they can't build the country in the way you want. So moving on, PM stresses India-China strategic autonomy. Well, that's good. Rice and tractor exporters charting a new course. Shipment of certain goods to US drop in June quarter with focus on other markets. Gem and jewelry guys, by the way, said that we had front loaded our, our exports to US considering whatever is happening. But then this whole particular new duty is causing a problem, the penalty is causing a problem, and so on and so forth. So the government has said it can't be paying anybody, right? They are saying that we need to be subsidized till this particular thing is clear. Now everybody is saying that this cannot be permanent, right? This particular situation where India is tariffed like that cannot be permanent. However, uh, I think we are all up for a rude awakening because Trump is essentially rallying EU to lay tariffs on India, some sort of penalizing tariffs on India because of whatever their rationale is that India is supporting the Russian war. They say that EU needs to essentially lay tariffs just like America has laid tariffs on India so that they can stop buying Russian oil and the Russian oil, war can stop, right? Now, US is obviously a $30 trillion economy. The next is EU, which is a $17 trillion economy. And EU's and India's trade agreement has not been finalized, right? It's gonna be finalized by the end of this year, somewhere around October, November, December. If anything happens, or if Trump derails India's deal with EU, then we are screwed, man. Then it's gonna be a big hassle because India has been very clear that it's supporting Russia. It's gonna buy Russian oil. Russian oil, cheap energy is very critical for India. India has maintained because this became a standoff, right? America and India. Now, if Trump is successful in rallying EU to essentially penalize India for buying Russian oil, then it's all down from there, right? It's just screwed. How probable is that? You don't know. So a lot of people say that, oh, that's not probable. He can't do that. He can't influence EU and so on and so forth. You would be surprised. So before Trump, America was essentially paying. It had spent $120 billion in Ukraine, 120 to $150 billion in Ukraine. NATO was a big concern. EU didn't used to pay anything for NATO, right? The entire bill used to be on US, and US used to be paying for NATO. And the EU, just very shamelessly, the EU countries didn't pay for NATO at all, right? Then came Trump. Now America is actually selling Ukraine its weapons, and European countries are paying for it. Then you look at the deal which US signed with Europe, a very good deal for US. So they've been US under Trump administration has been very good at monetizing anything, and if this happens, he'll just threaten EU, and so you don't know what happens, right? At that stage, what can India do and what can Indian businesses do is a very good question. is a very good question. Moving on. RBI stocks up gold, cuts T-bill pie in FX kitty. So RBI has been stocking gold. In fact, not just RBI, all reserve banks of the world have been stocking gold. All reserve banks of the world have been stocking gold like never before, right? China, India, and everybody else is just really going heavy on the gold play. Gold holding rose and US Treasury bills declined to 227 billion from 242 billion a year ago. So treasury bills, they are just giving it away, and gold they're stocking up. And if a lot of companies are doing this, this essentially points towards some sort of weakness as far as US dollar is considered, right? Uh, Now, what happens with that is anybody's guess. But this is very, very weirdly escalating into a very big shift, as predicted by Ray Dalio. Now, everything was fine until India wasn't in play, right? Because India was a counterweight to China and so on and so forth. But if India also goes in China's direction, the whole uh, Russia, China, India, that becomes a block. US gets de-dollarized far quicker than it would otherwise be de-dollarized. So very, very tough times. I mean, tough in the way, tough to analyze times. You don't know where it's going, right? You don't know where it's going. Moving on. All eyes on RBI amid rupee slide. We talked about that. Bond strike a chord in with FPIs in yield hunt. Buying of local bonds by FPI surged. We know why local bonds are, surging. Buying of local bonds by FPIs. Viewers of Thinkers Frequency, can you give me a cheer? Why are, Indian bonds being bought by FPIs? We've talked about this a lot of times. I took a sip. Uh, can you give me an answer? It is related to. I don't want to give it away, so I'll just say it. It's basically rating improvement, says Mr. Tiwari. You're right. S&P triple B negative to triple B sovereign rating got better, and also it's not just the sovereign rating got better. Indian Inc are in a very good liquidity position, right? That's also play. But as the rating went up, the government quickly did the whole GST rationalization. Now with that GST rationalization, what happened was that government's ability to pay back loans essentially decreased, obviously, because it's going to lose a lot of money on the GST it was otherwise getting, right? And with that, what happens is the bond yield rose again. So as the triple B rating got revised, triple B negative, triple B, bond yield reduced, right? The interest rates reduced. But then government did all these reforms, and then the interest rates rose a little up again. So this is what happened. I'm giving you an idea about the whole situation. But Indian companies are still, the bonds are very, very attractive for you know people. Moving on. Fantasy sports ban may choke cricket revenues. I think a lot of this is just BS, just lazy news making, because cricket will get sponsors somehow, anyhow. Cricket is like the fulcrum of the Indian entertainment lever, right? It's the shoulder on which the whole Indian entertainment industry essentially rests on, and nothing is gonna happen to cricket. But right now it says fantasy sports. Notice the framing: fantasy sports ban may choke cricket revenue. These people are trying to frame themselves, and they are also saying that a lot of gaming companies, or let's say betting companies, a lot of this talent would actually move to actual gaming companies, and so on and so forth. Now, neither of those things are gonna happen, right? Neither is the fantasy sports ban gonna choke cricket revenues, and neither are is the ban on these companies going to lead to gaming companies. spurring of new gaming companies in India at the rate that these people are suggesting, or the reports are suggesting. Why? Because number one, cricket, is everything in India, and number two, betting companies and gaming companies have a fundamentally different talent stack. Okay, fundamentally. So these people have been framing themselves as gaming companies, but they're not gaming companies. They're betting companies, and the talent stack you need for a betting company is it's like a world apart from a talent stack you need for a gaming company. So if you look at Rovio, if you study Rovio, or if you study Activision, or if you study Rockstar Games, right? Let's say Activision and Rockstar Games are more towards computer gaming and so on. That's a very different market. Let's stick to just mobile gaming, right? Let's say if you study Niantic or Rovio, these people have like a DNA which is fundamentally different from the gaming companies. Oh, sorry, betting companies. Now, betting companies have nothing in common, so none of these things are gonna happen. Fantasy sports choking cricket revenues, number one, and these companies spurring a lot of gaming companies, number two. None of these things are gonna happen, right? Moving on. Who told you first? Remember that when this particular play happens. Companies wondering how to save the festive dates. So the GST meet is gonna happen on September 3rd to September 4th. Shraddh happens from September 7 to September 21, and Navratris begin from September 22 to October 2. Right now, this is particularly very, very interesting, and that's why people have stopped buying right now. Deferred purchases are happening, right? Deferred purchases are happening. What's deferred purchases? We've talked a lot about front loading. Front loading is when people start buying or selling right away in anticipation of a price hike or something negative happening in the future. Deferred purchases is when something happens, something good is supposed to happen in future, and so you stop buying, right? Both the cases are not that cool. We've discussed about Osborne effect, if you remember. Osborne effect was in 1980s. There was a company called Osborne Computers, and its founder was a pretty good company, right? And what the founder did was the founder had launched a computer, and then he essentially started touting his next version a lot, that the next version is gonna have this, the next version is gonna have that, the next version is gonna be, it's gonna be God. Essentially, God will come down from heaven, and in our next computer. What that happened was a lot of anticipation got built for the next next model, and the company went bankrupt before it could even launch because people stopped buying the current model, right? So deferred purchases are not great, but retailers are having to brace it. Retailers wait for shortest shopping window as GST revision inauspicious period run close together. So that's the play. Ideally, this particular season begins now, right? But it's gonna begin later because GST revision happens later, and after GST revision, people are gonna be, clubbing their purchases. Moving on. Such fascinating things happen in the world, right? By the way, speaking of fascinating things, all the people, the stock guys, the analysts, they are giving a buy rating on consumption stocks, FMCGs, and so on and so forth, even consumer durables. Now, do you remember who told you this like about 90 days ago? With time, right? With time, I had said that consumption stocks are at a down low right now, and they're gonna peak. The income tax slab, the GST, the rationalization. The biggest problem with the country is the consumption play. You remember that we discussed it in such depth. Now finally, consumption stocks, are turning around, and it's another one of those predictions which went right. Moving on. Armenia seeks ties with Pakistan. That's a historic shift. Now, Armenia, Azerbaijan, a quick geopolitical play. They are fighting countries. Armenia and Azerbaijan have had wars, a lot of wars. Now, Armenia in 1990 had a successful war with Azerbaijan where it retained its property. But recent war in 2021 or 22, it was a big war where Armenia got thrashed, right? Now, Armenia is a Christian country, Azerbaijan is a Muslim country, and these two people fought. Now, Pakistan didn't, until now, doesn't recognize Armenia as a real country, right? So they've been backing Azerbaijan, of course. India has been more like balanced, but now it's siding with Armenia. It's trying to develop relations. It also talks to Azerbaijan, but it's more towards Armenia. Now, Armenia and India have a very close relationship. We've Pakistan is also warming up with Armenia. Now, this is very surprising because in the larger order of things, this is very weird. Pakistan has suddenly gotten a lot of flux, positive flux, coming from a lot of places, right? Modi stresses LAC calm, she agrees, eyes big picture. PM pitches for Swadeshi goods this festive season. Well, this is an old sell, Swadeshi movement. Uh, Basically, buying indigenous products and so on and so forth. Why do you think it's necessary? Why do you think it makes sense for PM to be talking of Swadeshi, right? Vocal for local, Atmanirbharta, and so on and so forth. Because of something we discussed earlier, right? India is a deeply dependent country. India is a country deeply dependent on imports. We have like extraordinary amount of imports coming to the country from China, from everywhere, essentially, and that drains the forex, right? That is a big problem. Also, it leads to no economic opportunity creation for Indian businesses, the small businesses, even the large businesses. The entire industry essentially falters, right? Until now, India didn't have a toy industry. Did you know that? India barely had any toy industry. All the toys which still come to India are basically Chinese, right? So what India is trying to do is they created a toy park. They invested a lot of money. They said spur the national toy program, which essentially leads to manufacturing of toys in India. So this is another of those steps. One mantra, vocal for local, one path, Atmanirbhar Bharat, one goal, developed India, says PM. Which is an obvious sell, very hard to implement, very hard to implement. When anybody says, don't buy Chinese, the answer is, what do you buy then, right? Because it's all China. Moving on, Azure Group is settling with the US. What's your view on vote chori of BJP? Asks Mr. Nirav Rawal. I wouldn't comment on politics. We don't discuss politics here, unfortunately. Fortunately, I mean, we very luckily, very nicely do not discuss politics at all. We only discuss business and economics and finance. And even if we are discussing geopolitics, we choose to stick to its effects on economics and business and finance, right? We don't talk about it because it's just a waste of time. Also, those discussions are far more complicated than business. So discussing politics is very, very hard. Speaking of politics, something related to it, Azure Group is settling with US $23 million. It was a case where Azure essentially was bribed. It exited, and then Adani took over the project. And then Adani, if you remember the Hindenburg play, where the judge, the US court judge, essentially said that Adani is a part of that lobbying operation where it bribed in India. And then the company in US essentially got in the whole rigmarole, if you remember. Azure is a related party, and they are settling. And they're saying it's not an admission of guilt. It's just that we don't want our investors to be dragged into a legal fight, right? So that's what's happening with the Azure play. Azure is accused of violating US SEC Security Change Act, false and misleading statements on compliance with anti-corruption laws. So it says that you made those disclosures and then you ended up bribing and so on and so forth. If you want to watch a movie in this regard, a very good movie in this play is called A Civil Action. John Travolta. Extraordinary movie, one of very underrated movies. It says it's settling. Whenever you're fighting a case, you never go for court's verdict. You always settle because that's where the money is. right? That's where the money is for the lawyers, of course. Moving on. Uh, yeah, we talked about this. Auto Inc. sounds the horn against higher slab on premium EVs. So right now, EVs are, the economy EVs are at 5% GST and then the 18% GST on premium EVs. The companies are saying that this is against India's mission of going electric, India's mission of essentially, the whole emission play. It's not going to be helpful for the industry in general. Their perspective is that premium EVs is where the technology gets developed, right? The commercial, the small EVs, essentially, that's not where real innovation happens, right? So if you are to support the EV revolution or EV evolution, you've got to support the premium play as well. Now, of course, every industry tries their best to get the best out of the whole GST play. We've talked a lot about similar argument was posted by RC Bhargav sir recently. He said that hybrids should be, should have a GST of 5% because EVs are at a GST of 5%, the economy ones, and which is not good because emissions, you've got to promote all components of the clean energy story. So EV is not just one component. There's alternate fuel, there's green hydrogen, right? There's ethanol blending, there's hybrid vehicles. So you've got to support everything. And if you are if you have a GST of 18% on hybrids and 5% on EV, you're basically disincentivizing hybrids. So every industry essentially tries to position themselves as that particular play. Speaking of industry and how they interact with the government, it's very interesting what has happened with the pharmaceutical industry. They've been going with the inverted duty structure, right? Inverted duty structure. They say that the pharma products that they sell at a GST play of 5% now. Earlier it was 12%. Yeah, just 1 second, let me check. Yeah, attract a GST of either 5 or 12, while active pharmaceutical ingredient is sourced at 18%. So API is the core, the core compound which makes the medicine. And India imports almost all of its APIs from China. So Indian pharma is essentially a sophisticated trade operation. It's not an innovation operation. It's not really a biotech operation. It's more of a trade operation. We take a lot of APIs from China. Most of our APIs from China, 90%, somewhere about 80 to 90% of APIs from China, and then the generic drugs are being are made, and they are GST'd at 5%. So 18% GST on the raw material, 5% GST on the finished product. Now what happens to this is, the problem with this is it's called an inverted duty structure. You end up paying more GST on the raw material, you get less GST from the consumer. The money gets stuck, the GST gets stuck, right? So they want the GST to be higher so that both the GST can get balanced and they don't lose out on money, right? So that's what pharma industry is seeking, rate inversion. At present, this and that, we talked about this, right? Cash crunch and so on and so forth. Similar claim was, by the way, put on by insurance companies. They said, if insurance gets exemption from GST, we're going to be ruined because, we're going to have a lot of money stuck due to the inverted duty structure. And one other industry was claiming that. I forget which industry was that, but one other industry said that we need to fix this whole inverted duty structure. Speaking of comments, Mr. Mittal says, just recently I noticed a made in India kids kitchen set. That's beautiful. Beautiful if that happens. Moving on. Increasing tariffs to help but need more users. Now this is Airtel. So when it says tariff, it basically means ARPU, average revenue per user for a consumer. Airtel's says, tariff in the telecom industry means what the consumer is paying. And tariff in the geopolitical realm means what the country is paying, right? Country and its products are paid, essentially. So Mr. Mittal is saying, Airtel is saying, increasing tariffs to help but need more users. So Airtel is at the second play. Its ARPU is higher than Jio, but it's still at the second play, and it's looking at user acquisition. So two players have been adding more users in the Indian telecom play. That's Jio and Airtel. Jio has about 500 million subscribers now, users. 500 million. That's like the second largest telecom operator in the world after China's. There's some Chinese telecom player, Chinese T-Mobile. I don't remember the name of the company. They are number one, number two, Jio. Huge. And then there's Airtel. So they are saying tariffs are helping, ARPUs are growing, but we could use more users. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Moving on. Private capex set to rise 21% and at 2.67 lakh crore in FY26. That's what I said. But most of its rise is essentially power sector and then construction, right? Hotels on the lookout for staff ahead of busy months. So hotels, not just hotels by the way, quick commerce, e-commerce, retailers, hospitality players are all essentially looking at adding a lot of temp manpower, which is great news for temp manpower, for people who are looking for these kind of jobs. However, bad news for the job market in general, because a lot of these jobs which are created, especially by quick commerce, they're not jobs, they're traps, as we've discussed. Jobs created by e-commerce are not jobs, but they are traps. First of all, they're killing the retailers, and each retailer, if gets killed, leads to loss of about 5 to 6 jobs as per my calculation. The solid math, I'll share it with you. I hope to write an article about it soon. But yeah, and then the jobs that these people create are bottom of the barrel jobs which have no scope of moving forward. So what is a job? What is work, right? A job is something that has a future prospect, right? Let's say a person who joins a call center. He starts as a caller, he can be a team lead, he can be center manager, he can be whatever, right? Customer, client servicing person. So essentially, there's a path to where a person can go, where he joins a call center. Let's say even if you work at McDonald's, right? You are mopping floors at one, then you can move to the kitchen, then you can move to the kitchen operations, you can move to the buying, and so on and so forth. There's a career path, right? What's the career path of a delivery guy who is being hired by these people? His career path is, right now he's making like 40 bucks, 40 bucks per delivery. All he has to do is pick stuff from this place to a 3.5 kilometer radius, right? A, B, B, A, B, B, A. He learns no skills. And that 42 bucks will be 40 bucks tomorrow, will be 38 bucks day after tomorrow, will be 36 bucks, the day after. So it's basically a trap where a person gets a job which pays a very little amount, which adds to no skills, which essentially has bleaker prospects for the future. Right now, it's people who are doing deliveries, right? What if drones start getting deliveries? Zomato tried drone deliveries in Pune years ago. So what if drone deliveries start taking up even a bit of share, right? These people can't even develop any, technological skills. They don't have communication skills. They're basically traps. So this is a big problem. But as far as hospitality is considered, it's a very good play. The peak October-December quarter surge in openings during festive season are likely to create 2 to 5 lakh temp jobs this year. EVs may form 40% of two-wheeler market by 2031, says Ather. Ather coming out with a good report. So two good news right away, right? Number one was a new platform, a fresh platform for developing their vehicles. And number two, the report which says EVs will form 40% of the two-wheeler market by 2031. How much is EVs share right now in two-wheeler market? Let's check. I know the share in four-wheeler market, it's 4.4%. It used to be 2.2% earlier. Now it's 4%. I'm guessing EV share would be how many EVs? Just let's try and calculate if we can derive that, right? So Ather sold 14,000 vehicles in a month, right? Ola, and that was about 15% share. So essentially what you're looking at, 17% share, is looking at EV selling 1 lakh bikes, two-wheelers. Okay. Now, how many bikes does India sell in total in a month? We know we sell about 40 lakh cars. 40 lakh cars. So we should be selling about much more two-wheelers, right? How many two-wheelers must we be selling if we are selling 40 lakh cars? We should be selling like 1.5 crore bikes, right? Bikes, two-wheelers, all in all. 1.5 crore bikes. Is that a good guess? By the way, we sell 1.5 crore smartphones every year. Are smartphones and bikes the same? My guess is somewhere around 1.5 crore bikes should be sold. And if we are selling about 15 lakh bikes, two-wheelers, EV, 15 lakh out of 1.5 crores is 10%. So the share, as per our mental workout right now, should be 10%. Ather says 40%. Let's see what the share is right now. EV two-wheeler share in India. What? Really? No, that's not true. Again, total two-wheeler sales in India. Total two-wheeler sales in India. 1.79 crore. So that's, that's totally accurate. I mean, what we guessed was 1.5, right? We were pretty good. 1.5 crores is what we had guessed. They sold 1.8 crores. That's okay. Total EV two-wheelers. 1.4 million, 1.14 million. That's about 12 lakh rupee, 12 lakh. So we were 100% right, essentially, 10%. Now, no, we're wrong. 1 second. Two-wheeler sales were 1.8 crore. That's okay. And electric two-wheeler sales was 12 million, 1.2 million. So we were right. 10%, and it can rise to 40%. Mr. Mittal says 4 lakh cars per month. 4 lakh cars, 4 million is 40 lakh cars. Yeah, 4 lakh cars, correct. So good math, right? This is the mental workout which we should do very regularly. It helps us a lot. It's very, very good if we can do that, right? And notice that I didn't have a perfect clue on what either of those numbers were, but I guessed, and those guesses turn out to be more and more right, which lead to better predicting abilities. You can actually predict where things go, right? With the whole play. Moving on. Something that we could see, advanced tech coal power project on the back burner. So the government was looking at advanced tech coal power project, essentially for better emission play, right? So the power problem was AUSC, advanced ultra supercritical technology. The BHEL, NTPC and these people had developed this technology. R&D was done in 2020, December. And the cost of bringing this particular technology with the whole project was 6,000 crores, and the government is re-evaluating. It was re-evaluating basically, because it says that you don't you can spend similar amount of money on newer technologies, let's say nuclear and so on and so forth, instead of actually upgrading your coal power projects. So that's what the government says, and a very big project is essentially put on a back burner as far as the play is considered. Uh, yeah, that's the 6,000 crore proposed for the project. Mix of renewable nuclear sources can achieve far more efficient power without AUSC tech or subsidies. So that's the play. Mr. Mittal says no, we weren't. 6.6 to 7%. Yeah, 6 to 7, 8% essentially. I said 10%. Not pretty much in the same ballpark, right? Not exact, but yeah, not too far away, I guess. Steel makers call for more protectionism. We've talked about this. China makes a lot of steel. China makes more steel than the whole world combined. And until now, Chinese steel was getting used in Chinese projects. But that seems to be essentially going away because Chinese economy is also under a bit of a stress. So less projects which could use that steel, which makes that steel come from different places to India. We found out, viewers of Thinkers Frequency would remember that Nepal was becoming a major exporter of steel to India, right? And we found out that, hey, Nepal doesn't have any of those units. And then we found out, oh, it's Chinese steel which is coming, right? So Indian steel makers are talking about some duty protections. They're saying that the current duty which we have, which is about 11%, despite a 12% interim safeguard duty, it's not enough because there's going to be a flux of steel coming from everywhere, which will kill the, Indian steel manufacturing. So they are trying, the government essentially, let's say, convincing the government to have more duties in place so that national steel could, could be saved. There's not going to be any significant demand revival in major consuming countries, steel consuming countries like China or Europe, and which is going to lead to a bit of a problem, right? Moving on. Steel, we've discussed, is the arsenal of democracy, right? Moving on. India in talks with Australia to build 1 million homes, explores funding support from UAE. Now, Mr. Piyush Goyal has teased the with saying that India is talking to, nothing is said right now. So it's basically he spread a rumor, but he says that I am in deep discussions with Australia to build 1 million homes in Australia. Now, you do the math, he says. You do the math. 1 million homes, that's a $500 billion project, right? And if we can get that project, it'd be amazing. So he's saying that we are going to UAE, we are going to the West Asia to actually secure funding to deliver this project. So Australia has a housing problem, right? It's, essentially a housing problem is, and to solve that housing problem, it's basically creating new housing units. Or somehow, Mr. Piyush Goyal has found himself in the middle of that discussion, and $500 billion worth of project, some part of it at least, could be coming to India, which could be great news. Moving on. A breakdown below 24,350 may intensify selling in Nifty, but consumption stocks might be up, right? Will it be another muted September for Dalal Street? We discussed this already. Moving on. India opts for golden hedge, cuts T-bill share and raises gold. Well, we talked about that. Consumer stocks may offer silver lining. Yeah, we know. we know. We know. Life after 88. What happens now? We discussed that. Moving on. CMS to replace 1,000 ATMs for India Post Payments Bank. So there used to be a company called AGS, which just fell apart. Now CMS is the second best company in that regard, and it's taking 1,000 ATMs. ATM, by the way, the business itself is not thriving anymore. Why? Because India moved towards demonetization and UPI and so on and so forth. Now UPI is like having billions of transaction every month, and which is basically leading to decline of cash. And now, while it seems like, oh, it's gonna kill cash, but no, cash, like supply in the cash market, cash supply is rising, but cash, the ATM demand is going down, and which is a very good news, by the way, because to maintain an ATM, it takes a lot of money to have that money in that ATM, to secure that ATM, right, so that somebody doesn't steal the money, to transfer that money from an ATM to an ATM. So they have hubs where cash comes, the cash needs to go and get deposited. So it's a very, very expensive operation, right? It drains a lot of money to just keep the money in ATMs. And ATMs as a business is falling. One big company out. Chuck Renovation, by the way, has gotten the Social Enterprise Award. Chuck Renovation was founded by my friend Arpit Dhupar, was the founder of Chuck Renovation. He came up with the technology. He didn't come up with the technology, but he like used the technology which could essentially like trap pollutants coming out of mills and so on and so forth, factories, and then make ink out of them. Okay, so Cottrell precipitator, what it does, it's basically a capacitor, positive and negative. The dust particles or the pollutants are charged, right? So they get trapped on one side. You collect them and then you basically turn them into ink. That's their product. So they've been doing well. Now my friend Arpit has moved on from the company, but he was the founder of this company, and they've won the ET award, which is huge. Moving on. The protests going on in Indonesia against parliamentarians. Right now, whenever I read protests, I read frauds and scams, right? Because all the protests, most of the protests, none of them are organic, and they're basically politically charged, motivated, paid for activist groups, right? Very little grassroots movements. But something is happening with Indonesia. People have been saying that, these parliamentarians are getting a lot of money and a lot of access and a lot of overseas trips and so on and so forth, and they are draining a lot of resources of the country, lawmakers' perks, and that's what the protest is going on. So got to see what's happening, right? You see a student protest happening in Bangladesh, and the next thing you know is that, oh, the government has been overthrown. Madam Sheikh Hasina has been airlifted from Bangladesh to US. And then you find out that, oh, US deep state was involved in the regime change operation in Bangladesh. And they established their stooge, the Mohammed Yunus guy, in Bangladesh. And suddenly everything is ruined. And then you don't realize, but you got to look at these things very, very closely, right? Because India has a very good relationship with Indonesia. Moving on. UK to supply Norway's new Navy frigates in a $10 billion agreement. That's okay, that's fine. China factory activity slump continues despite tariff relief. The PMI, Purchasing Managers Index, it's at 49.4. It was earlier 49.3, and now it's 49.4. Slump 49. So Purchasing Managers Index, it's above 40. That means factories are expanding. If it's below 50, if it's above 50, factories are expanding. If it's below 50, factories are contracting. They're shrinking. So 49.5 means that they're almost there, shrinking by a bit, right? Despite the trouble. A Bloomberg survey of analysts had projected 49.5, but it's basically 49.4. So that's what's going. Macro outlook for the rest of the year depends largely on how long exports can remain resilient. US-China trade war, despite everything, and so on. This brings us to the end of the 99th episode of Thinker's Frequency. 99. My God, I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't one. It's a song. It's not me. I'm not calling anybody a bitch, but yeah. If you're having girl problems, what was the line? If you're having girl problems, I've got news for you, son. I got 99 problems, but a bitch ain't. Anyway, This brings us to the end of the 99th episode. I had a lot of fun talking. Our daily mental workout, our daily dose of insights and analysis, which don't lead to paralysis right before we punch in. It's 9:12. We're gonna punch in anytime soon. I gotta thank Mr. Tarun, Mr. Tushar Tiwari, Mr. Mittal, Mr. Rajat Rathi, Mr. Nirav Raval, and everybody else who joined. I wish you a beautiful day personally and professionally, and I'll see you same time tomorrow, hopefully. Please take care and bye bye.